Ah, Smart Water, now in a sleek can.
This feels cool, literally.
Perfect for social gatherings and on the go.
Should I start wearing turtlenecks?
One sip at a time, friend. Smart Water cans, for those with a taste for taste. Get yours today.
The Stone Zone on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back. We're in the Stone Zone again. And joining me now, direct from Poland, is the senior editor of Human Events, Navy intelligence officer, proud Catholic, a MAGA patriot, also a New York Times bestselling author, Jack Posobiec. Jack, welcome to the Stone Zone.
Roger, thanks so much for having me on.
So I have to ask you off the top, how was Poland? You know, the Polish make their stuffed cabbage slightly different than the Hungarians, but it's actually still quite good. How was your trip?
Well, I had a lot of glumpki, or as my parents call it, pigs in a blanket in English, on our way home. And what can I say, Roger? An incredible nail-biter of a victory, come from behind win, being over there at this CPAC Poland, which sort of acted as a de facto political rally for the conservatives there in Poland, in southeastern Poland, right on the border with Ukraine, which, funny enough, actually is the area of Poland where my family, the Posobiec family, actually hails from. It is, in fact, this will come as no shock to anyone, the most rock-ribbed, hardcore Catholic conservative part of all of Poland. So, big shocker that that's where the Posobiec family is from. And a 1-point victory for the conservative, campaigning hard on issues of Ukraine, issues of immigration, border security, and having the support and de facto endorsement of President Donald J. Trump. This carries a lot of weight in Poland, and it's a tremendous victory, one by which will absolutely be a huge victory, not only for all those things, but also for the pro-life movement, because the liberals in the Polish parliament have been trying to legalize abortion in Poland. This will put a stop to all of that.
It's very exciting. Look, I think nationalism is beginning to sweep Europe. They had to cancel the elections in Romania when the conservative candidate won. You have Meloni, who shifted back to the right now that she has Trump as a reliable ally. I liked her initially, then she started to suck up to the globalists, because I think perhaps she thought Joe Biden was going to get reelected. And then with Trump's election, she has gone back to her roots, which I certainly like. You have Hungary, which is a beacon of freedom for all of Eastern Europe. You have all of these. The French, they had to throw our candidate in jail because they're going to lose. People are tired of unregulated, uncontrolled immigration. It's destroyed every one of these countries. It has not destroyed Poland. It has not destroyed Romania. Why? Because they have never allowed it.
Well, Roger, that's exactly right. And actually, when I went over to CPAC Hungary, I had the honor of being invited to sit down with Prime Minister Viktor Orban, and he had a lot of conversations and a lot of things to say about this, specifically on the question of mass immigration. He talked about the problems that have been going on in Germany, the problems that have been going on in France. And Roger, I have to say, by the way, on the way home, we stopped. We had a long layover, basically a day-long layover in Paris. Wanted to take my children to see the Notre Dame after it had been reopened. It was an incredible experience. But that very night that we were in Paris, these mass riots kicked off. It was precipitated by a win in the soccer championship for the team, Parisian City team, and yet the migrants came out in full force and started setting fire to the city. Hundreds of people were arrested. I had to grab my wife and my children and say, this is a bad situation. We need to get back inside as soon as possible, because we saw it, Roger. We saw it going from Poland and Hungary and then to Paris. The Notre Dame is beautiful, but what they've done in terms of this migrant crisis, Paris is not Paris anymore. President Trump is exactly correct on that, and I just thank God that we were able to safely make it in and out in the midst of all these riots.
So, Jack, what do you make of the Elon Musk, Donald Trump tiff? Is this really about insufficient spending cuts in the big, beautiful bill, or is it about something else?
Well, Roger, I think it seems to be very personal on the perspective of Elon Musk, and I think that anyone reading this seems to think that it has a lot more to do. Certainly, the way he reacted is a bit more than just having a disagreement over spending. And in fact, this bill isn't even a budget bill. The budget bill comes up later in September. In fact, this is a bill regarding deportations, regarding President Trump's agenda, regarding no tax on tips, regarding no tax on overtime. This is an agenda bill. It's not a budget bill. And I certainly agree, by the way, that I would like to see a lot of the DOGE cuts, all of the DOGE cuts really codified into law. But clearly, I think there's a lot more going on. And what I hear, there's a lot more going on behind the scenes. One of the top issues, of course, being this EV tax credit being removed as part of the bill, a huge blow to Tesla as a company, as well as Elon's pick for the NASA director ultimately being removed from his potential appointment, his nomination going in, which, of course, would have been a huge leverage point for SpaceX as well.
Jared Isaacman, who the White House actually announced that he would be the NASA director, and then it was pulled back when it was learned that he had given money to numerous Democrats, including Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, the senator from Georgia, Adam Schiff, and others. So I think Elon's nose was out of joint about that. He also they rejected his bid to have the air traffic controllers across the country use Starlink in their technology. I think he was miffed at that. I do think that he's done a tremendous service for his country. When I met him at Mar-a-Lago, I said, you've done more for free speech than anyone in the history of the country other than the founding fathers themselves. And I believe that to be true. But that's what got a target on his back. Remember, he flirted with supporting Ron DeSantis for president. It was really only after the events of Butler, Pennsylvania, when he saw how desperate the deep state was, and he realized that if Trump lost, Elon Musk was most likely going to jail, and his companies would have been destroyed. That's what Biden was seeking to do, and this was the payback for not just buying Twitter, but releasing all the proof of government-sponsored censorship. So he embarrassed the regime.
Roger, that's exactly right, and we know that this was a situation where, of course, and look, I'm an incredible fan of the X platform. I use it every single day, and I think it's something that Elon Musk did, years before the election, that really created the conditions for President Trump to be able to return to the political sphere, because it was during that time that the truth about COVID was finally able to be told in a public dissemination, a public manner. It was during that time that the truth about President Trump's lawfare was able to come to light. They were going to put President Trump in jail for the rest of his life. They tried in 4 different times in various states and locations to put him away, and obviously tried to strip him from the ballot, and even got to the point where they attempted to kill President Trump multiple times. And so it obviously was a key effort by President Trump, Elon Musk, and of course Bobby Kennedy and the Maha movement, which I think really gets discounted a lot when people tell the story of 2024, not by yourself, of course, Roger, but many people and certainly the media completely discount the fact of the Maha movement and the strength and the importance of Bobby Kennedy's endorsement crossing the lines the first time a Kennedy has ever really publicly endorsed a Republican in such a way, and did so at just a seminal time for the United States of America. And so certainly I, like many others, do hope that there can be a way to mend this great schism.
I agree with that. I must tell you, I think when Steve Bannon says that we should deport him, if he's a U.S. citizen, you can't deport him. And secondarily, that the government should seize his companies or one of his companies, that's what we call communism. I think that is an overreaction. But look, he can be a powerful ally. He spent his own money to help Trump win. I do think it had a positive impact. Would Trump have won without it? It's impossible to say. But I think it is not good for the movement overall. Let's talk for a moment about the tariff war. The tariff war kind of got moved to the back burner here. But how do you think the president is doing in his efforts to make our trading partners pay their fair share, or to give us an even deal, I guess I should say?
Well, I think the president's doing very well. And for folks who have been keeping score, even though it's not really in the headlines, and people say, oh, well, he walked back to 150% tariffs. And I've seen a lot of people say, they'll be very upset to say, oh, well, he had these tariffs and the formula wasn't using the proper tariff formula for the net balance of trade deficit. Look, the trade deficit is actually flipping for the first time ever in years in the United States on the backs of the tariffs. The Atlanta Fed is now forecasting an incredible explosive growth for the U.S. GDP in terms of Q2 in the United States. And we currently still have tariffs that are in some cases 20% or more on these trading partners, including the additional tariffs that were labeled onto China. This, of course, is also coming at the same time that the Chinese are begging President Trump for a meeting. They're inviting him to Beijing. They're doing everything they can to roll out the red carpet for the president because, of course, China. This has always been about China. China has always been our biggest budget deficit. China is my background. I spent 2 years living there and working in trade in between the U.S. and China. And so this understanding that China's economy is so fragile because they are export driven. And there's a lot of talk about China having an expanding middle class now, and they certainly do, but it is completely built on exports and the fact that we allow these cheap Chinese goods to flood into our market. And this was, I think, foolishly, this most favored nation status was given by the previous, the original George Bush administration and the Clintons before them, paving the way for all of this. This was never meant to be part of the deal when Nixon went to China in the first place, as you of all people know, that we were never supposed to give them this most favored nation status. But this was how the system of globalism was built. And what President Trump is smartly doing is understanding that the system of globalism is crumbling, and it's crumbling on its own. But so what he's going to do is put America in a position where we can benefit, we can be strengthened, and we don't have to have these global commitments the way that we have in the past, and actually right the ship economically for the American people and the American manufacturer, who is usually the last when it comes to Wall Street's way of thinking.
I could not agree more. I really do think that people need to recognize that there are three legs to Trump's economic stool. It is, first and foremost, it is better tariff deals with all of our trading partners. An issue he's been talking back all the way back to 1988, because he hated NAFTA, he hated GATT, he hated these one-size-fits-all trade deals that completely disadvantaged the United States, and as the late, great Ross Perot said, sucked the jobs out of America. But tax reduction is every bit as important. I don't love this AI stuff that is in the big, beautiful bill that stops the states from restricting AI. I think that's a bad idea. As someone who can tell you there are hundreds of AI videos of me saying things I never said, this is extraordinarily dangerous. I'm very concerned about it.
Well, Roger, that's right. And one of the, I suppose one of the messages that I've heard Stephen Miller and the White House put out regarding the AI piece of the bill is what they're really aiming at here, and perhaps this language can be tightened up, but what they're really aiming at is blocking California, because most of these companies are based in California, blocking California from having control over all regulation of AI. Basically, that China, and they saw that Newsom was having some plans to be able to regulate AI at the state level, which of course would have been written by the companies themselves. And so I can understand perhaps the considerations there, but would also want to make sure that that the language is tightened up as much as possible.
I agree. It is concerning. But the good news here is that the Golden Dome funding is in there. The Golden Dome, which we used to call the Strategic Defense Initiative under Reagan. The left mocked us by calling it Star Wars, but it's working in Israel, protects Israel from incoming missiles, could protect our country. In some cases, the Congress has voted funding for parts of it, but still hasn't been built. The one for the East Coast, they have never cited. Should go to Fort Drum in upstate New York. That makes the most sense, but they're dragging their feet. I think that funding is also in the big, beautiful bill. Not to mention the continuation of the largest tax cuts in American history. It's not perfect. Elon's not wrong about that, but it's good and it's a start. They have a $98.4 billion rescission bill going up to the House next week. That's where the cutting actually needs to be done, and that is the third leg of the stool, cutting the wasteful spending, the fraud, the corruption, and so on. We're going to be right back with Jack Posobiec. You can follow him on X as Jack Posobiec, how original. He's also at Human Events, where he is the senior editor. We're going to be talking about the Trump administration, how Robert Kennedy is doing very specifically when we come back on the other side. So whatever you do, please, my friends, don't touch that dial. We're back in the zone. I'm talking to Jack Posobiec, the senior editor at Human Events, served his country with distinction as a naval intelligence officer. He's a keen analyst of the political scene. He has a unique set of sources. He's a man who always seems to be one step ahead. If you don't watch him at Human Events Daily, I strongly recommend it to you. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Taking on big pharma and big agriculture. This is not going to be an easy fight, but he's fulfilling what I wanted him to do. This is what I voted for. Jack, what do you think?
Oh, Roger, I think that's exactly right. And I love just even, I think it was either today or yesterday, he announced this nutrition education mandate, these new plans for requiring American medical schools to offer nutrition courses, and basically saying that all federal funding will be pulled, and using that leverage, the same way we see President Trump doing with Harvard and others. He's now saying that your federal funding will be cut if you do not offer this nutrition education and these programs. And these are really things that the federal government can be doing and should have been doing all along, rather than serving as a piggy bank for these universities. I think we need a restructuring of the way the federal government's spending of our taxpayer dollars are done. And the MAHA movement is obviously one of the most important ways to do this. I've said for quite some time that the MAHA movement is actually the most politically popular movement in America today. And I see this with when I talk to my wife, who is not someone who's, she knows about politics from being married to me, but she just doesn't follow politics on a regular basis the same way that, news junkies like myself do. But she is absolutely enamored with the MAHA movement. She was born in Eastern Europe, came to the United States, and has always asked questions. What is wrong with your food? What is wrong with your medicine? And that's exactly the type of demographic that Bobby Kennedy is speaking to. Politically, it makes the most sense. And for America's health and America's nutrition, it makes the most sense. Roger, you mentioned earlier that I just got back from Europe. Europe has tons of issues, but they don't have the same type of health issues, the food issues, and the nutrition issues that the United States does. And unfortunately, your friend and mine, Tony Lyons, have been chatting about this a little bit as well, and he made a point to me recently saying that we've done so much to make food cheaper and say that we're cutting costs in order to do so, and that's why we've put chemicals in all of our food and why we have factory farms the way that we do. But unfortunately, we're not actually saving any money, because all of those costs then go into our increased healthcare bills, end-of-life spending, increases in health insurance that we have to pay because of chronic illness and chronic inflammation, something that, of course, Big Pharma is more than happy to keep going because it creates a financial incentive for them.
There we have it. We have to wrap it there. I want to thank my guest, Jack Posobiec with Human Events, and thank you for tuning in to the Stone Zone. Until tomorrow, God bless you and Godspeed.
The Stone Zone on the Red Apple Podcast Network.